Good morning, Savannah. Good morning around the world. This is the Vulnerable Community. This morning, I'm Jerome Irwin. I'm your host. We have our co-host, Reverend Alan Maynard. And with us this morning to talk to the vulnerable community, we have Attorney Chad Mance. And we're going to get right into the show this morning because we have some important issues to talk about. Uh, Chad Nance gave me a scoop of what he wanted to talk about, and I'm looking at this paperwork I got in front of me. So I'm gonna let him. He's got a lot to say, so I'm gonna stand back. Reverend Maynard, would you say good morning, and then we'll let uh, Attorney Nance have it. You're on mute.
Good morning, Savannah. Good morning, Chatham County. Good morning, distinguished guests. Good morning, Reverend Irwin. Uh, Chad, we thank you for being a part of the show. Savannah, wake up, Savannah. Here we go. Back to
All right,
you.
Brother Nance, go ahead.
Well, first, good morning to everybody, and I want to thank ATR Media. I want to thank you, Leader Irwin and Leader and Pastor Maynard, for having the vision to really push our side of the narrative. We, as vulnerable members of the majority society, quite often don't have outlets to express what's going on in real time in our communities. And we do know that information is power. And I think this platform is power. So thank you. To the folks that are tuning in, I'm here to talk to you about access to the courts. Access to the courts. And this is something that is particularly important to the Black community because all of our rights really in America were dependent upon access to the courts. And for example, we integrated our systems through access to the courts. We desegregated our society through access to the courts. And we will continue to hold folks accountable through access to the courts. Unfortunately, in the state of Georgia, we have seen a bill that directly confronts our ability to access the court system and maximize our ability to hold folks accountable when somebody has been injured. This bill that I'm here to talk to you about is Senate Bill 68. Senate Bill 68, y'all probably have heard the governor talk about as lawsuit reform or tort reform. And a tort is basically another way of saying a civil wrong or something that we go to court over when it comes to money damages. And money damages are all that we have in the civil justice system. It's not like in a criminal justice system, we can lock the person that hurt us up. And money damages, when it comes to getting systemic change, are really important because corporations a lot of times will make decisions based on dollars and cents. And if there's no risk financially, a lot of times we see that there's no change. And so I want to go over with y'all what I think the implications for the Black community are, particularly here in Savannah. And this bill has a real likelihood of passing and changing a lot. I want to start by highlighting what's going on here in Savannah. Savannah is a city that is too busy working, building our economy to not be safe. We're too busy building our economy working, especially in the Black community, to not be safe. So what do I mean by that? Our ports are driving the economy of the United States. We have one of the biggest ports on the Eastern Seaboard. We have one of the biggest ports in the nation. And if anybody is to go down to, for example, visit our ILA 1414, which is composed of majority African American workers building our economy and our ports, you'll see we get hurt. Sometimes we're in vehicles that get picked up by cranes and drop down again. Other times we're on ships and things fall off and hit us in the head. Other times there are whole containers that fall on us and crush us. And so the workers at the port are disproportionately affected by this bill, because when that happens and you can't work again, you've got to go to court to try to protect your rights and try to protect your family. Also, people in the service industry are disproportionately affected. A lot of times we have folks that are hurt while working for hotels and restaurants. We also have folks in the construction industry here. For example, we see construction everywhere with the hotels being built and the apartment complexes being built. And when there's a construction accident and somebody falls from a scaffold or something falls on them, for example, those folks have a legal redress in our court system as well. And then, of course, we have our truck drivers that are on the road all the time and always around folks that want to take a chance or drive unsafely, and sometimes are victims of accidents themselves. Those truck drivers that keep the wheels of our economy spinning are also at risk. And so the list goes on. And not to mention that we know that in the African-American community, crime is rampant. And in some of the apartment complexes where we live, they don't care enough about us to even provide security, and they know there's a problem. We know that folks get sexually assaulted when people sometimes break into their apartments and assault them. We know that people in Savannah, we had a young lady just die from a stray bullet in her apartment bedroom. These are the types of things that are affected by this bill and the type of folks that are affected by this bill. It is going to devastate the Black community. So I want to go through a few key provisions of the bill that I think are problematic for us. If you show up to a jury and you want to suggest what pain and suffering is, the bill in its first form tried to take that away. Now, they don't want the plaintiff or the injured person to be able to say, well, you know, my life was changed and now I'm paralyzed. And so I think you should give, you know, however much in pain and suffering. They don't even want you to suggest that. They're taking your voice away. The time to, for example, dismiss and refile a case if something goes wrong, that pretty much is nullified. They are narrowing that. I think there is some compromise going on, but I think they wanted it initially to be within a short window the time the defendant popped up in the case. And there's still some negotiations around it, as I understand it. And I think the rule for that was that the defendants generally had 30 days to show up in a lawsuit. If a motion to dismiss was filed, then the time for you to find out things for discovery was stayed for 90 days. But if you wanted to dismiss a case, you could only dismiss it before the opposing party showed up. Now you can dismiss a case at any time before you swear in the first witness. All that means is if you bring a case and don't know everything, you don't have a second shot. So there are all kinds of parts of the rule. I think this bill has other components that are more disastrous. Like, you know, if you're hurt, you can only get credit for the amount of bills that you actually paid. So if you can't afford to go to the doctor, guess what happens to your medical treatment? It's gone. You can only get credit for past medical treatment that you've actually paid or incurred. And then if you are shot on apartment complex premises or due to crime, for example, in a negligent security case, it takes the standard to basically you have to establish actual knowledge, meaning the apartment complex had to actually know that this was going to happen, which is almost impossible. Now the standard is should they have known? And really the list goes on and on, but I want to take time to interact with Brother Irwin and Reverend Maynard about any specific questions you might have on the bill and how I see it affecting the Black community and what we think we can do in our community to address that. Do y'all have any specific questions? I think it might go smoothly.
I'm sitting here and believe it or not, I downloaded the bill. After you sent me the bill number, I downloaded it. But listening to you speak, when you said that they're going to eliminate trying to eliminate pain and suffering, the one thing that really caught my eye about this bill, this is solely a Republican bill. I don't see a Democrat name nowhere on it.
Yes, sir.
And it shows you how we go out and we vote, and we don't pay attention to who we're voting for. We just go vote.
Right.
And now it's coming back to haunt us.
Right.
Because these are the people we put in place. And they're not even caring anything about us.
Well, you think about it this way. If we had elected Stacey Abrams, would we be having the same conversation? Right?
Right.
No. I mean, I can assure you that. If we had a majority Democratic Senate or a majority Democratic hold on the legislature in general, will we be having the same conversation? I don't think so.
Yeah, you're right. You went on mute.
Your people, and some of those people still voted for this bill. Can you believe that? Their clients might be affected.
Attorney Mance, would you repeat what you said? You were on mute, sir.
Yes, sir. I think we had some, I'm not trying to make it a Democrat or Republican issue, but I think there were some Republican legislators that represent injured people as attorneys, and they still voted for this bill. Can you imagine that? To me, that's like a suicidal ideation. You're fighting for the rights of these people, and yet you vote for a bill where they don't have a voice to tell the jury how much they lost. Now, we're not talking about a fender bender my neck and my back hurt kind of situation, right? I'm talking about the situation where, somebody is paralyzed for life, and you're taking their ability to tell the jury, I feel I lost this much in my life. You can decide. The jury's always going to decide, but they're taking the voice of the voiceless away. And that's not right. I think the right to trial by jury is something that we've protected since the founding of this nation. And it's the only thing that stops us from being an authoritarian, Hitler-like run government, right? I mean, even the president has to go to trial, right? Theoretically. And what we're doing is we're telling corporations they can be unsafe, do business in Georgia, hurt our consumers, compromise our GDP, and then that's the standard that we have as a state. And I don't think that's just concerning to me, especially since so many Black folks get injured and brown folks get injured because we work with our hands all the time and we're in dangerous situations.
Well, you just made a statement about It's not a Republican or a Democrat thing. It's a corporation. As we see, greed is taking over America. Greed has played a part in destroying our society, in destroying our communities, especially the Black and brown communities. So, and that being said, because of this bill, what are some of the things that we need to do to counteract this bill?
Y'all always have y'all are like 3 questions ahead, right? That's why I love talking to y'all brothers. One thing you can do is to find your representative, okay? And I know y'all talk about this all the time, right? There's power in knowing who represents you and in what Senate district you're in and what House district you're in. And there are websites out there where you can go and you can just simply type in your zip code or your location, and it will pull up what district you're in and who you're represented by. And then after that, you need to call them and write them to tell them very specifically why the bill is not right. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out. And by the way, we're going through the process, I think, where there can be amendments to this bill, and there have been some amendments made. But, the pain and suffering piece, the voiceless have to have a voice, right? And the part about security and all of that, I think if you tolerate crime on the premises and you should have known about it, it's all around you, and you just do nothing and turn a blind eye. I mean, you can hire a security guard for what? Minimum wage, right?
Right.
And you might save a life. We're not talking about a whole lot of money or being prohibited in terms of expense. And by the way, we need to make sure the legislators understand that this is not a bill about insurance rates, because what they have not done is explain how they have not explained that the insurance rates will definitely go down. And that's because I think they know that the insurance rates won't change,
Okay.
that they'll continue to go up. And I think we need to regulate these insurance rates and not take away safety. So these are points you might want to think about.
Hold that thought right there,
Yes.
Attorney Vance. We got to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with you.
Okay.
Right there. Oh. Sorry.
He must have walked away. We ready for the break now, so we'll.
Savannah, are you looking for some of the best Southern soul food? Then check out Kim's Cafe at 714 MLK Boulevard. The food is so good, you'll think that your mother cooked it. Located in the heart of Savannah, Kim's has a menu that includes breakfast anytime, lunch when you need it, and dinner so you won't have to cook when you get home. They also cater all types of events and can host your reserved event at the restaurant. Come see what everyone has been raving about. Great food, great atmosphere, and a great time. Kim's Cafe, 714 MLK Boulevard in beautiful downtown Savannah.
All right, we're back. Now back to that thought you had, Attorney Mans.
Well, there's been, I think one of the stated pieces behind the bill is that insurance rates will go down, is what they're implying. But I think they're saying that this is based on some study that the insurance commissioner has done. We don't know anything about the data. We don't know anything about specifically how much they'll go down. And we don't have any guarantees from the insurance companies that the rates will go down. So if you're saying this to the public or implying it, give us a specific promise. Tell us it'll go down by 20%, 30%. And if it does not, then I think we need to put this bill back on the table and look at reversing it if it passes. But, you know, I think the truth is that the insurance companies know they'll be more profitable, right? I mean, in the state of Georgia, you've got Geico, you've got Progressive, and you've got State Farm, three of the biggest insurance companies in the world housed in this state. Geico, I think, is earning $3 billion right now. So if it were that expensive for the insurance companies to do business, how is Geico worth that much money? There are just a lot of inconsistencies, and I think this is just basic politics. I think, you know, if people can appeal to corporations, they can raise money and look at their own ambitions and maybe do higher things later. But I don't think we need to be playing with consumer safety. I think our nation was built on that.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, Attorney Mance. Attorney Mance, I know you can recall that there was a case that happened some years ago with a young boy by the name of Asaya. He was shot in a housing project. He was shot. Not only was he shot, he had to pay the medical. The state of Georgia had to help pay the medical fees. Okay, nobody else was accountable. But then on top of that, they were evicted. Now they're homeless because of such that nobody stood up for this family. No one. So there has to be something put in place that there could be no retaliation to people that are filing lawsuits or anything against these corporate entities.
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the things the governor's office and folks that are pushing this bill, and I say governor's office because he said it was his primary objective, but I think one of the things that they're doing is they're leaving out the facts about what injured people actually go through in real cases. You know, if a little boy is shot, like in the case you're talking about, that child is not concerned about a lottery ticket. His mama is not concerned about a lottery ticket. They're concerned about the safety of this little boy and what it takes to endure being shot, to endure hearing bullets night after night, to endure being homeless, to endure going into medical debt that is substantial, to endure homelessness and debt and, you know, psychological PTSD like issues that often happen is really indescribable. And you got to think it takes 24 months to get to court quickly. It takes 5 years or more in some cases in this area to even get to court. So if they wanted a lottery ticket, a get rich quick kind of scheme, they wouldn't be waiting 5 years, don't you think? So they wait because they have to wait because they have no choice. And their only option and their only hope is the jury trial. And when you take away their voice to suggest pain and suffering, or you limit their ability to somehow present their cases or restrict their ability to refile and get access to the courts, what you're really doing is you're communicating to corporations. Y'all can do whatever you want. We're about corporations over the rights of individual people. And I'm concerned with that message because it's the people that work day in and day out that make this economy. If you take away the workers, you don't have a corporation. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and we can talk about other specifics in the bill if you want to. We can talk about other things. Y'all just tell me how you feel this is this conversation should migrate or progress.
Well, like I said, what are the protective measures that we should go about to protect our our people's rights, especially in the case of the young man that was shot. In cases of others, what are what are some of the measurements that we should take to help them, Attorney Mance, by the legal and the law?
The immediate thing is, and I think this bill might, the language of the bill says it takes effect when the governor signs it. And this is Senate Bill 68, y'all. But I think the procedural aspects of the bill might be retroactive and apply to your current cases or your family members' current cases or your neighbors or friends. So one of the things that you might want to do is to urge your legislator to kind of work with the timing of the bill and to assess when it would apply and how it would apply. And I also think the first thing anybody can do is to read the language of Senate Bill 68. And I'm counting the pages here. I've tried to summarize this
17.
amount. It's 17 pages. It's 17 pages. It's kind of a dense read in places, but you can get through it. And to know how this applies if somebody is hurt. Second thing you got to do is to get in contact with your legislator and let them know how you feel about this. Don't feel like you got to be. Yes.
So is there anything that our local government can help us with in such of a case of this bill, and in the cases of the young man and the cases of the young lady that was killed? What are some of the things that the local government can help us with?
When you say local government, you're not talking about our local delegation at the state capitol, are you?
No, we're not talking about them at all.
About county and city.
We're talking about county and city.
We know that when you are in a position of power, you have influence. And one of the things that I think our local elected officials can do is to explain what would happen if, for example, this bill is saying if you get hurt, the only thing you can present to the jury is the amount of medical expenses that you've actually paid. Now think about that. Most of us are underinsured, right?
Yes.
How are we going to pay a medical bill when we don't have insurance and maybe the doctor won't see us? Well, I'm going to tell you how. We're going to have to go to Curtis v. Cooper. We're going to have to go to J.C. Lewis. And they're already overburdened right now and underfunded. And so what's going to happen is the state government is going to shift the financial responsibility for these injuries from the corporations that caused it to the actual county and local governments and nonprofits that actually fund the places like Curtis v. Cooper. And so I think at a local governmental level, there need to be some conversations about how it might impact things. But I think also your local elected officials need to contact your state representatives and tell them, let's just let 6 to 12 members of our jury decide this. We don't need to be interfering with the jury's power. Our system is fine. And I think what's going to do, remember, the courts, the judges are funded by the county. Okay. So our county commission actually issues the funding to make sure that our county courts work right. And if our court system is clogged up with cases, or it takes longer to process cases, which I think it will under this bill, then our county governments are going to have to spend more money funding, for example, maybe additional resources for courts to try these cases and to put the jurors in place. So in the end, I think it's going to cost the counties more than it'll cost anybody, but it's going to cost every level of government. So have these conversations with your state elected officials who are going to vote on this and your local elected officials and help them to understand that this is a costly proposition for everybody but the corporation.
You know, I was looking at the list of signees. We have a local representative who is a doctor that signed those bill.
Yes, sir.
And you know, that seems like he's cutting his own throat.
He might, you know, and he might not. It depends on who his constituents are. I think one thing is for sure. Doctors get hurt just like people on the ports get hurt. Lawyers get hurt too. You know, I represented a lawyer who was an insurance defense lawyer that got hurt. And the insurance company tried to basically rake him through the coals. Everybody gets hurt. And so it's always somebody else's problem until you have to go to court. And then if you go to court, imagine if you're a doctor and you can't work anymore and they're telling you can't suggest an amount in pain and suffering to the jury. I mean, that to me is insulting. You got to be able to tell them what you think and what you feel and let them decide. The corporations want to do the deciding for you. So I think we need to examine who's for the corporation and who's for the people. And I don't think corporations are bad, but I think when they're unsafe, they're a problem for everybody. And what this bill is doing is saying it's okay to be unsafe in Georgia because you're going to bring us more money, but you're going to tax the consumers in the end, still raising insurance rates.
Well, that's the big issue here in the state of Georgia, because we have been advertised as cheap labor, number one, and you come here, we get the work, you can get the work done at a cheap rate. So I reckon they're gonna try to get the insurance rates down so they don't have to pay insurance either.
Right.
But now I was listening at you when you opened up, and you were saying that they even want to take away the suffering from say if I got hurt and I was injured for a length of time and I was incapacitated and my wife had to do everything, and they want to take that away also. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. So anybody that would have what's called a non-economic damages claim, which is basically something you can't prove with receipts, just think of that as pain and suffering. They would say the language of, at least in its original form, SB 68 would say you cannot suggest an amount that you believe is appropriate to the jury, and you cannot suggest a range. And so, you know, you couldn't say, I believe that you should give me $50 a day because that's what I earned at my job for my pain and suffering because it feels like a full-time job. You couldn't say, well, you know, maybe you give me $10 an hour, or maybe if you feel like it's worth more, you could give as much as $50 an hour. But it's your decision, members of the jury. They're taking that totally away. As written in Senate Bill 68, but I think there might be negotiations around this. So hopefully we can change it if it has not already changed.
I want to get off the subject just for a minute with you. I don't know whether you paid attention to it, but in our area, the rent rates have gone sky high.
Yes, sir.
And and it kind of pertains to this too, because you were saying people getting hurt, but with the project rent so high and apartment rent so high, look like they should be able to hire security guards to guard these places and make sure that they stay at least safe with the amount of rent money that they're getting out of the people, because people can't do nothing but afford to pay rent.
Yes, sir. Y'all might remember there was a guy named Jimmy something or another that ran for president, and his campaign was the rent is too damn high. You remember that guy? He was out of New York, but it started in places like New York, and it has migrated down the eastern seaboard and across the U.S. because home ownership rates have decreased, and the amount of debt that people who would own homes traditionally has gone through the roof through things like student loan debt and other things. So it's a fertile ground for apartment complexes to build. And yes, you're right. If apartment complexes that are worth, a lot of money sometimes just based on the real estate on which they sit, get paid more rent, the least they could do is to have a minimum wage security guard just riding around the premises checking for anything wrong. But what has happened is they don't have to spend money on it. And the more they spend money on, the more they make money. So it's profits over people. It's profits over safety. And these places, some of them, they do studies before they even build, and they determine the level of crime in the area. So they full well know what the risk is, but they decide that the financial benefit is worth more than the actual risk that they'll take. And that's why they decide to take it. And so you're right, they could do more, but if we're in a government that's taking away their accountability, why should they do more?
Well, I would be remiss not to speak on that and say thanks to Senator Donzella James that she's coming out with that SB 125 bill. That bill is to counteract the bill that they have in place already that says that that legislations cannot determine our how much rent should be, or how the local government can put it in the local government's hand to help assist with that and put a cap on it themselves. So thank goodness for people like her that are coming together with the community that's saying, no, we're not going to even stand for that at this level. So we'll be remiss not to tell the people in our county, in our city, in our community to come out and let's formulate and sign this petition, and let's go to the state capitol and stand with her.
Right. And when we have a brave stalwart like Donzella James, Senator James, we need to celebrate that sister because she's in fight after fight after fight after fight after fight, and her voice is dependent upon her constituents' voices being amplified, and that's what makes organizing and sometimes, if necessary, protesting and phone calls and press conferences so important. Because if we abandon our voice, when she goes to the legislature, it's harder for her to push this agenda and say, look, we've got a real public outcry about it, right? And that doesn't mean we do this for everything, but when we have a significant issue like raising rent that affects everybody, we have to amplify that and get the message out and do so on one accord. In our community, our problem is a lack of unity and fear and a feeling of powerlessness. That's why we often do nothing. And so we've got to change that narrative and be aggressive about it. Speak up for your rights. Don't be quiet and mealy mouth. That's not what Dr. King and W.W. Law and Hosea Williams fought for us to be able to do.
Hold that thought right there. We'll be right back. We got to take another quick break, and this will be our last break, and we'll be right back.
Need your garments cleaned with care and with a professional touch? Then bring them to One Price Cleaners in Garden City at the Old Farmers Market on Highway 80. Service you can count on.
All right, we're back. Now, you were talking about some of the old leaders. You called some of the old leaders' names, and I'm gonna put you on the spot.
All right.
Because I've known you for a long time, and I know who you mimic yourself after at some time. So my question to you is, when are you going to offer yourself up for public service?
Well, I'm not. Well, first of all, I'm continually in public service, and I think if we're thinking like a servant leader, and we know y'all are religious men, as am I. He said, "I came to serve and not be served." Right? That's what the highest servant, Jesus Christ, said. Yeah, I think we are always in public service. And we don't need a position or a title to do that. That's part of the problem in our community. We want a position and we don't want a passion. And so that's a part of who I am. And it doesn't matter what title I have. I came to serve and not be served. A secondary note is I think service mostly is needed on the economic side. And we need more thriving African-American businesses. And I think the law firm that I'm putting together, that I'm running here in Savannah, is where that service is primarily needed. There's a lot of injustice. There are a lot of folks getting hurt. We represent them. There's a lot of issues in the legislature we can address as lawyers that we can if we were in office. I'm here to address that. And of course, we always are giving back to the community. So you won't see me running for elected office anytime soon. I'll say that. And I really don't have an interest in it, to be honest with you, but I do have an interest in supporting elected officials. And I think this legal institution that we're putting together of excellence is where I can best serve right now, because that's where the most need is. Does that answer your question, Mr. Irwin?
Yeah, you answered it, yeah, to a certain extent.
Well, ask me again. You can follow up. We can follow up. That's not a problem. We don't keep it real TV today.
But again, we were talking about the SB 125. Am I correct? So when SB 125, we need our county commissioners, we need our state, our school board to go and say, listen, we want to go ahead and roll back the millage rate. That way we can have lower taxes, and so we can have something else to stand with them and stand for the renters and for the high tech, the high rent being paid. $2,300 for a duplex when minimum wage is still $7.25, when the most that they'll pay you, especially in hospitality, is $10. How dare you tell me I have to pay a $2,300 rent? And then not only that the utilities have gone up. My light bill itself has gone up $109 because of the rate. And so imagine that's happening to me. So it's happening to a whole lot of other people that are on budgets, that the elderly, people that can't afford such. So these are the things that a corporate America is doing to its own people and putting a burden on. And so when you're putting a burden on your folks like that, we've seen stuff like this happen in the Bible. After King Solomon went off the scene, his son came up behind him, and he listened to the legal advice of his friends instead of going to wise counsel and say, be more of a tyrant and more of a burden on the people than your father. And you see, it split Israel. And that's what's going to happen to America. That's what's going to happen to our counties. That's what's going to happen to our cities. They're going to put the burden on us so much that everybody's going to be homeless, and it's going to be a backlash.
Well, I mean, look, I agree with you. And I think there's a tension between faith and fearlessness. And some people say, well, God is going to take care of it. I'm going to do nothing. Faith without works is dead.
Amen.
I'm going to sing and I'm going to praise God and he'll take care of it. Malcolm X said in The Ballad or the Bullet, he said, I hear some of these protesters singing, but it's time to stop singing and start swinging. And so I think that the expectation is not just to have the faith and the hope that it'll happen, but to exercise our God-given free will to do everything that we can to serve those that cannot serve themselves. And the beautiful thing about a democracy, and we still have a democracy, although we're diluting it, is that anybody can do it. You don't have to be the president or a state senator. You can do it by picking up your phone. It doesn't matter if you are homeless. If you've got a phone and you know your senator's office, you can call. And what we've got to do is to exercise our democratic rights, because what happens is that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing and good women to do nothing. And that's what has happened. Powers of
Yes.
being.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have been playing it safe in Savannah for too long. We have been playing it safe in Chatham County for too long. We see other cities that are moving and shaking. Other cities have been affected, like our city is being affected, but they've done almost the same things we've done. Rent strikes, standing up, but it was called unity. And that's something that we have gotten away from in our community, in the Black community. We don't unify anymore. See, there is a bunch of elitists that can lead the people and say, listen, you don't go with those kind of people because they're troublemakers. But baby, let me tell you something. If you don't get an agitator in the washing machine, you don't get clean clothes. So
Right.
You need agitators in this community to push these folks and say, listen, don't listen to the elitists because they're leading you astray. We need to formulate and and come together and say no to these things. Yes to this, no to that. And that's what we're doing in the community, because I fight for the least, the lost, and the left out.
I think you're
Sounds like
right.
agitated to me.
Well, think about it this way, right, Pastor Maynard? You know, I think a good bit of folks on this podcast are religious, maybe Christian. If you're Christian, that means you look at the example and paradigm of Christ. Christ was not an institutionalist. He was an agitator.
Agitator.
If him in modern form, he would be much more like the guy with a protest sign questioning the Pharisees than he would be the elected official telling us what the legislation means. And so there's an argument that your religious duty is to agitate and to ask hard questions. Now, agitation doesn't mean separation. It doesn't mean that you are being divisive, but it means that you are not afraid to speak truth to power, because that is necessary for the conscience of the community and for the conscience of the person that you're speaking to evolve. And
well, I disagree with you on that point, because sometimes we do have to be separate, and that part we have to be separate, because if we keep the Bible say you know the fruit by what it bears, right? A tree by the fruit it bears. Now, if I keep being around this type of fruit and I don't separate myself from that, but I said I'm going to help these people over here, I can't be effective to these people over here if I keep hearing and I side with these folk on the left side. So I would have to separate myself and get and see what's true.
Right.
And so therefore I would rather stand for truth than to fall for a lie any day.
Oh, I agree with you. We don't disagree. We on
Yes,
the
sir.
same.
Yes,
I
sir.
just was articulate as I probably needed to be. If necessary, you have to separate to stand for something, or you'll
Yeah.
fall. But you start out trying to work together. If they don't want to do right, then you have to act right.
Yes, sir.
You know
What else have we got that we need to kind of take up? Because we've got a lot of issues in our community. And to everybody listening, this is not fiction, y'all. It's happening from the federal government to the state government, and in some places in the local government. They have outlawed diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is, by the way, code word for we don't like doing business with black people and for black people. They have tried to, by the way, in states like Florida, take away the ability to talk about books related to civil rights. Now they're trying to take away Black History Month, and it's February, y'all. They tried it during February. What is really happening is there is a persistent urge to take us back beyond the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and into a position of indentured servitude, because they want the elites to have everything and folks that are the least, the lost, and the left out, as Pastor Maynard said, to have nothing. And the way that happens is that you and I don't participate. And so now, I don't care what you do. I don't care how you feel about government. Tell government how you feel. And if the elected officials don't do what you say do, you vote them out just as quickly as they were voted in. The way that we got where we are is not enough folks turned out to vote. Not enough in our community turned out to vote. I know you think that when you vote, nothing happens. But when you don't vote, more happens. Because you're a non-factor. And what we've got to do is realize we have the power in the palm of our hands, not just to cast a ballot, but to vote with our dollars. If you see that there's a business that does not support diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm going to tell y'all right now, don't go to a Target. If you see that there's a business that says we don't support, for example, a cause related to civil rights, and you stand for that, then I'm going to tell you right now, reevaluate where you spend your money. In one weekend, if everybody took all its money and went to Kim's Cafe, do you know you would create an extra millionaire in this community? And that millionaire would give money back to our church. They would help people in our communities and our NAACPs and our urban chambers and all of the institutions we need to run well, and our Main Street YMCAs. But to the businesses, if you do well, you must pay it forward. If you do well, you must pay it forward. That means giving back to the people that gave to you. Give back to Black organizations and Black churches and deliver a good service. But we have to have a partnership, an economic and a social partnership that works for our children and our grandchildren and our families. Because when you take your dollar and you go outside your community, that is a vote against who you are. When you take your dollar,
that not only outside of our community, we have allowed them to come in our community without a community partnership. We have the Chinese that never gives back to any cost for us, but we'll go to the Chinese restaurants and we'll spend $100 there. We'll go across to the Arab stores where they won't even give us $20 for Juneteenth, and we'll support them wholeheartedly. Which right now in West Savannah, we're coming together to build a trade school. Now, let's see how many people are going to get on board with us, helping us to help our people with the trade school. The trade school is going to have all kind of compartments in there. We're going to have we want the unions to come in there. We also want people like yourself, Chad, to put a law firm in there so the people of that community can say, hey, look, we got somebody to represent us.
right. Well, you call me, you know the number.
Oh yeah. And so these are some of the conclusions.
Y'all, and we're gonna have to do this all over again. Attorney Nance, you got 2 minutes. Wrap it up for us with 2 minutes, with a 2-minute statement.
Senate Bill 68 is not going to decrease your insurance rates. Really, it's a choice between safety and profit. It's going to affect everything from pain and suffering to how and when you bring a cause of action to whether you can introduce information related to medical bills. It's going to affect how long it will take you to get to justice. It'll affect how long it'll take for you to try your case and how much money our courts will spend. I want y'all to read it and come up with opinions for yourselves and reach out. The key here is that the only way we can make our government safe is if we make sure that there is safe government. We got to make sure our elected officials work for us. We got to make sure the interests of the African American community are heard and respected. We have to make sure that we vote with our conscience and not for popularity. We have to make sure that when we have leaders that they're accountable and they're not, we'll call them Uncle Tom. We have to make sure that we are proud of who we are and what we represent. And Senate Bill 68 and the House bill that Reverend Maynard is talking about are all part of the same demon of greed. Y'all got to get in the game. By getting in the game, we change the game and make it better for our children. So thank y'all for having me here. And I have faith in our government. I have faith in our community. And I know we'll continue to be a democracy, but only with the help of the people.
Well, we thank you for being with us today, Brother Maynard. We will see you next week. But we want you all to remember what the heart of the whole story is. You got to get out and vote. You can't sit home. You got to go to the polls. You got to voice your opinion. And if you don't vote, you don't have no opinion and you can't say nothing about what's going on. So go to the polls and vote and get it over with. Until next week, next Tuesday at 10 o'clock, we will be right back here on the Vulnerable Community with another guest to bring more information to our community. So until then, we will see y'all later. Bye, all.
Like this.